Gen Z is the most connected generation in history. So why do they feel so alone? With endless social media, streaming content, and online communities at their fingertips, you would expect them to be thriving. But behind the filters and the group chats is a growing mental health crisis that's leaving millions feeling isolated, anxious, and hopeless. So what is really going on? Is it the tech, the economy, or does it all come back to the state of the world? Find out on this episode of The Infographic Show, Real Reason Gen Z is So Depressed. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. If there is one thing every generation has in common, it's worrying about the world the last one left behind. The greatest generation looked around at the Depression and the build-up to World War II, and they realized this would be their defining challenge. The silent generation grew up in the shadow of nuclear war, and the baby boomers found themselves in the thick of the civil rights movement. Gen X confronted an increasingly unstable world and experienced cultural shifts like the battle for gay rights, while it came full circle for millennials as they experienced recession and war. So why does it seem so different for Gen Z? Today, Gen Z are teenagers and young adults, with many entering college and the workforce for the first time. A report from MetLife shows that this generation is the most likely to feel stressed and depressed. 46% of Gen Z respondents in the workforce said they felt stress, compared to only 35% of all other generations. 44% reported being burned out, while 30% said they feel isolated. In general, Gen Z says they are less productive, less happy, and less engaged with their work. And if you ask the grown-ups, well, it's all those kids' fault. If Gen Z is down on themselves, it's nothing compared to how down their fellow employees are on them. Gen Z workers tend to get fired at a faster pace than their fellow employees, have a harder time getting hired, and are often behind the eight ball when it comes to workplace culture. High school teachers and college professors have reported them having both behavioral problems and knowledge gaps, as well as being unwilling to adapt to new rules and environments, making them hard to work with. Is this true, or is it time to hit the critics with an "okay, boomer"? Like most things, the answer is probably somewhere in between. Every generation gets hit with complaints about not being professional enough and not knowing how to do things the old-fashioned way. And sometimes they just shouldn't need to. Time marches on. It's like those memes about today's kids will never know what it was like to use whiteout on a term paper. Which is good. There is better technology, and Gen Z workers and students say the culture needs to adapt to them rather than try to force them into a box. But on the other hand, maybe the kids aren't all right. Every generation learns a little differently, and they always adapt to new technology better than the previous generation. Millennials are probably the first generation to do more typing than writing, and few of them know how to write in cursive, for instance. They grew up as computers were going from specialty items to household fixtures, but Gen Z is the first digital native generation, and they don't know any other way. That's led them to struggle with adapting when new skills are needed and they don't have any background in it. And then a whole series of things happened that threw them for a loop. Everyone was hit hard by COVID-19, and pretty much everyone has a story of how it messed up their life. But the virus, which dropped in 2020 and shut down schools in most areas for the better part of a year, hit the younger generation especially hard. Older Gen Z may have missed out on critical life cycle moments like prom and graduation, leaving them resentful and feeling like they never had a transition moment to the next stage of their life. Younger Gen Z, meanwhile, lost critical school time and had to make do with remote schooling, and they now find themselves further behind academically. But at least they had it easier than Gen Alpha, which lost out on some of the most critical years of early schooling. And some things made it harder, but then something came along to make it easier. When ChatGPT debuted, it seemed like a fun curiosity. It was a chatbot that seemed to know everything. It could answer questions, it could even write stories and draw pictures. It soon started getting integrated into search engines, and everyone embraced it, but no one more than Gen Z. They soon started using it to generate papers, to answer questions in class, and to create artwork that fit their interests. And in doing so, they had less incentive to learn, to grow their skills, and the struggles they may have had due to learning delays only escalated. Some students are even going viral for bragging about using ChatGPT to write their college theses. So why are Gen Z depressed? Well, why wouldn't they be? If you ask them, the world's a mess, it's only getting worse, and they have very little hope for the future. And there are plenty of things to be worried about, starting with how difficult it is to make a living these days. Gen Z reports heavy issues with finding jobs, with many companies using auto-reject software on applications and moving jobs overseas. Many full-time jobs with benefits are being replaced with gig work. And one of the main culprits for this? ChatGPT. Many Gen Zers worry about being replaced with AI altogether. And this might not be as big of a problem if costs weren't moving in the opposite direction. It's getting harder and harder to make a living these days, but everything seems to cost more and more. That's led to sticker shocks on purchases as simple as McDonald's combos. But that is the least of Gen Z's worries. Many of the purchases that kick off adulthood look increasingly out of reach, especially as fewer and fewer places are hiring teenagers during high school. That makes kicking off adulthood with paying for college, buying a car, renting an apartment, and eventually buying a house look like a daunting task, and maybe an impossible one, which has left many Gen Zers in a state of arrested development. Like the millennials before them, many Gen Zers are staying at home as they hit adulthood. But unlike many millennials, they don't have a direct plan for what comes next. College is expensive, and they've heard the horror stories about student loan debt from their older siblings. Jobs aren't hiring. Many report feeling at loose ends, like the world doesn't really have a plan for them. The description of high school as the best years of your life often looks ridiculous, but for many Gen Zers, it feels like the last time they had any safety net. But for many of them, it's the least of their problems. The fate of the world is at stake. Gen Z is one of the most politically engaged generations, and that can come as a double-edged sword. It makes them very aware of the problems in the world, but that means those problems are weighing on them at all times. While the majority of millennials were politically disengaged through adulthood, crises like 9/11, the Iraq War, and the 2008 recession hit them as young adults. Gen Z, by contrast, has had the specter of school shootings and climate change over their heads from an early age. And that's why, while you were still talking about Pokemon at this age, your 11-year-old cousin wants to talk to you about sustainable food choices. And they have more ways to learn about it than any other. But that might not be a good thing. Every generation learns about the news differently. Grandpa might still have the newspaper with his morning coffee, and Mom and Dad might faithfully turn on the radio or the TV news. You swear by the infographic show to keep you abreast of world affairs, of course. But for younger viewers, they're becoming increasingly reliant on social media to keep them informed, and that can be a mixed bag. For one thing, you can just go on the internet and tell lies. Most social media sites have become filled with trolls and accounts seeking easy clicks, and it's only gotten worse since it became easy to fake images with AI. And then there's everyone else on the internet. Every social media site has one thing in common. It is a thunderdome of ideas, where if you cross the popular viewpoint, you might have an army of trolls descend on you, threatening you and sending harassing images. That never happened on 60 Minutes, and the interactivity of social media can make spending time on it a stressful experience. Even if someone is engaged in an issue and determined to keep proving their point, being spammed with harassment is never fun. It can take a toll on someone's mindset after a while. And the problem is it's getting harder and harder to escape. Millennials were the first generation to be heavy video game players from childhood, and those games could be stressful, as anyone who got blue-shelled by their brother in Mario Kart knows all too well. But those games were either solitary or cooperative experiences, either played by yourself or with people in the same room. Today, most video games are online, and that means that you not only have to have a working internet connection to play, but you can likely face the same harassment from trolls halfway around the world. And disconnecting as a whole is becoming close to impossible. If you're from an earlier generation, you probably remember family vacations where you were loaded into the car and headed off to a cabin on the lake for a week or more. All of your electronics were at home, and you were completely unplugged for the vacation. Sure, you missed your Nintendo at first, but soon you were busy trying to catch catfish with your bare hands or chasing your little sister with a slug. And by the time you returned, you were a little out of the loop on news and memes. Why is everyone posting capybara pictures suddenly? But now, an escape like that is a foreign idea to Gen Z. Today, almost everyone has a smartphone, a mini computer with full access to the internet and more in their pocket. It is very rare for people to leave their cell phones at home on vacation, just in case of an emergency, and most areas have cell service. Even the most rustic cabins on Airbnb often offer Wi-Fi as part of your stay, and that means even your vacation might involve being tethered to social media and various apps, sometimes by design. Remember how fun Disney World was as a kid? Today, the experience heavily involves reserving spots online via the Disney app, which has led to many Disney adults complaining that they just don't make parks like they used to. But if you ask the government, one app in particular is the problem. Is TikTok ruining America's youth? A lot of people think so. So much that the US government passed a bipartisan bill to ban the Chinese-owned app, although as of June 2025, it's been held in limbo by the whims of the current US administration. But the app, which combines short-form videos with different types of content, has gotten a ton of flack for its political content and its hospitable environment for conspiracies. Sometimes this can be funny, like when someone claimed that Vladimir Putin had found an ancient vault that proved all the biblical figures were black. But other times, the misinformation has real-world consequences, like when someone posted a hack to get free money from a bank and the hack turned out to be check fraud. But things get even messier when real-world events start spilling in. The conspiracy side of TikTok got a lot of attention with the platform being filled with videos defending enemies of the United States, including Russia, North Korea, and even the infamous terrorist Osama bin Laden. More insidiously, the platform makes these videos very easy to view, often setting them to easy listening music and having an influencer dancing in the background. And the algorithm makes it easy for a new video to start playing as soon as the last one ends. And this could be having serious consequences for Gen Z's mental health. One of the biggest complaints older generations have about Gen Z is that they seem politically radicalized, and that can go hand in hand with mental health problems. If you spend all of your time mainlining depressing news about the state of the world, it only stands to reason that depression will quickly follow. Additionally, many scammers have taken advantage of world affairs, making up GoFundMes and other charity drives to help people supposedly from the conflict zones. Many of those accounts are from unknown locations, but it is possible to see hundreds of them a day on sites like Tumblr and the site formerly known as Twitter. And it's impossible to donate to them all, even if they were genuine. But is it really social media, or is it simply the state of the world? Many Gen Zers defend TikTok and social media as a whole, claiming it's the best way to stay connected. And that is true. Today, many people have global friend groups. Rather than trying to find connections in your own town, you find people who have the same interests and you stay in touch via platforms and online calls, and maybe even arrange meetups. For young people, this is the only way of communicating they've ever known, and it does open up new opportunities that were never possible before. But in the process, something else may have been lost. While world affairs and social media are the top suspects in why Gen Z is depressed, other experts speculate that they might simply be lonely. People are getting more and more isolated, social circles are getting smaller, and it's harder to find connections. That leaves most people spending their time online. Gen Z as a whole is less engaged in school activities, clubs, and sports, possibly due to the forced time off during COVID, and they report having fewer friends and finding it harder to date. And there might be a public reason for that. The term third space means a location that isn't work or home, and ideally it doesn't require any money to get in. Now, for Gen X and Millennials, the answer to that was easy: the mall. These massive retail plazas were once the hottest spot for teens to hang out. You could just have money for a quick meal at the food court and some quarters for the arcade and walk in the mall for hours. But those days are long gone. Many malls are struggling, with some having a majority of vacant spots. Others have passed regulations restricting unaccompanied teens from their grounds. And in general, some argue that society has just become hostile to young people. Gen Z teenagers often find themselves coming home right after school, immediately heading to their rooms and spending what little free time they have on the internet or playing video games. There are a lot of reasons for this, but part of it is that there are fewer places for them to hang out than ever. Many restaurants don't want large groups of teenagers spending more time than they have to there, and many towns have curfews for unaccompanied teens. And that has put a crimp in another classic teenage activity. Fewer and fewer Gen Z teens are starting to date regularly in high school, and that leaves them unprepared for dating outside of it as adults. It's becoming more common to just sign up for dating apps and try to find a match there, where you get one chance to make a first impression and not get blocked. This is a similar process to what applying for jobs has become, and it can be intensely frustrating and demoralizing. It's just another area where many Gen Z members report feeling like this future just isn't built for them to be happy. And when they look at the news, it feels like things are getting worse. Gen Z is the most diverse generation, with over 20% of the population identifying as part of the LGBTQ+ rainbow. But the climate has changed dramatically over the last few years, and many feel like progress is going backwards. Many companies have scaled back Pride Month celebrations, states are banning transgender care for trans teenagers, and far-right rhetoric is rising. And that's led many young people to point the finger at the grown-ups, saying, if you don't want us to be depressed, make the world less awful for us. But can Gen Z really compare with the original kings of depression? If you ask millennials, they've had a rough go of it. They came of age amid war and an economic crisis. Many of them have lost their jobs in the recession, and they are behind the 8 ball financially compared to the previous generations. Many feel like they're in a perpetual state of teenagehood, but in reality, they're pushing 40 and their knees and backs are starting to remind them of that. When Gen Z starts talking about the state of the world, they tend to roll their eyes. Can they really have it that bad? It turns out, yes. Millennials and Gen Z far outpace any other generation when it comes to depression, but it's not particularly close. According to the Behavioral Risk Factors Surveillance Survey, the average number of poor mental health days per month rose from 3 to 4 overall. But among young adults aged 18 to 25, it spiked from 3.55 to over 6 days. Twice as many young adults reported spending half or more of their month in poor mental health between 2018 and 2020 compared to the late 90s. But the surprising thing is, they are avoiding many of the biggest risk factors. Gen Z is the generation with the least faith in the future, but they're acting like they're planning on a long one. They're avoiding the pitfalls of past generations. They have a lower rate of alcohol use and smoking, and a lower rate of teen pregnancy. However, they frequently describe themselves as lonely, leading many people to dub them the Zoom generation, and that leaves them with less in-person social interactions and little to do but dwell on the state of the world and mainline news about it. And that has given them a very peculiar sense of anxiety. While many generations have dealt with crises relating to the world, the environment, and social issues, Gen Z tends to see more things as existential threats, and they see them around every corner. With climate anxiety high, any extreme weather event is seen as a harbinger. But that closeness to the crisis, it's also led many of them to become passionate, dedicated activists. They're getting involved in protests and making heated posts online that raise the attention of both parents and sometimes authority figures. But could this be becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy? Gen Z are digital natives, but many of them seem to have forgotten earlier advice. Never use your real name online, and never put anything out there that you wouldn't want your boss to see. Countless teens had a long online track record before they even graduated, and are now entering the workforce with their past content fully searchable. That could mean a rough entry into the workforce, or even a conversation with a police officer if they keep posting the same way as an adult. But the most significant factor of Gen Z depression might simply be they're telling us. Many Gen Z feel like they're living through the end of the world, but the world has been through far more intense periods, from the double whammy of the Great Depression and World War II to around 3 decades of intense fear of nuclear war. But mental health wasn't a big concern then. Psychology was still a work in progress. Very few adults sought mental health help, and even fewer sought it out for their kids. You simply muddled through, you went on your daily routine, and you didn't talk about your fears or depression. Then something changed. People started opening up about their mental health and encouraging their kids to do the same. And the kids listened a lot. Gen Z is by far the most open generation, to the point of oversharing, and that means that they're more than willing to express their anxieties and anger. Teachers and parents both have reported an increase in what they interpret as disrespect, but the kids will say it's just them finally being direct about what they expect the world to be. They're going to inherit the world after all. One day they will be in charge, but they might have to hold cabinet meetings over Zoom. Gen Z isn't alone in facing tough times. Watch Every Generation Explained in 10 minutes to see how each one grew up and what shaped them along the way. Or click on this video instead.